When I started here as a graduate assistant, my work started here with Mike Tracy, Dr. Mike Tracy, who was a faculty member in the School of Education, but also was one of the not co-directors, but associate directors of what was then known as the Developmental Training Center. And he had been funded to work on a project called the Deinstitutionalization Project. It was an attempt to believe that if we gave people who had lived in an institution, it was Muscatatuck, the opportunity to live in settings that were more natural and to allow them to explore those settings and live in those settings and do all kinds of things in those settings, that somehow that would make a better life for them. And what we realized is, and probably realized later, that the project was way ahead of its time in terms of what the community was like. But we were really attempting to, I guess in a nutshell, to bring people from Muscatatuck here to the Developmental Training Center.
And we went to Muscatatuck and plucked people off the day ward that these people were just warehoused. I mean, it was shocking even as a student that's what was happening, that people were in there being warehoused. And we brought them to the Institute and they actually lived there, and then we were involved in day services while they lived there. And we're a bunch of young students, we're doing our best, and we were directed by two really smart people. But we just didn't quite get it even then. We were scratching our heads saying, this is wrong, this isn't the right way to do it, but I'm not sure what the right way is. And it was one of the reasons why I decided, oh, this is what I want to do, because up until that point, that wasn't my focus at IU. I was involved in trying to find community experiences, and that was at that time groundbreaking. Trying to get somebody to consider having someone from that project work in their store or be able to participate in some way in the community was just so out there in terms of thinking.
The sort of, I guess, revolutionary thing for me was the value systems that Mike incorporated into the project was to say that you don't train people to get ready to go out in the community. You take a risk and let them go into the community and see where their strengths are and see where they needed support and offer it then. I remember for the woman that I was the advocate for, she had only been placed in the institution because the public health nurse was worried that as she was 13, 14 years old, she was a lovely girl, and she would walk down to the little square in this little town in southern Indiana, and that she might get in trouble with boys. And because she was unable to speak and they thought she was deaf, that it was best to institutionalize her, and the family did. I remember going down to meet the sister of this woman to see if there was any possibility of them having her live with them again. And this was part of the Deinstitutionalization Project, where we had to go into a community and look for empty niches, because really our research base was Barker's ecological research, and the idea was you find some empty niches in a community that would more likely accept a person that might not, that might be different from the others, because that person then could make a contribution. And so we, another graduate assistant and I went down to this town and assessed it for that reason. And one of the things was to assess was the willingness of the family to take her back. And so I met the family, went down there several times, and actually, just to close her story, the family had a trailer in the back, and they thought, well, that's where she could live. And she also had a placement. They had a disability program an ARC down there. So she got a job in a sheltered workshop. She had a boyfriend there. We didn't succeed in getting her a regular job, although we found some other jobs in the town she could have had. But anyhow, in the interaction with this family, and after meeting the sister a couple of times, I remember her saying to me once, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "I noticed scars on her sister's pelvis, and could she have been sterilized?" We come back and we thought, how could this happen that the sister who was her guardian didn't know? And bringing it back for this huge, complicated discussion here of, first of all, it was wrong, that nobody gave consent for this, and what are institutions doing that they're doing this stuff to women? And coupled with what's our role in finding this out? Are we to be the whistleblower and call them on this when the state is funding us to do this project? Very, very complicated role. And so those kinds of discussions led to, these bringing out and learning about these values of the worth of people with disabilities and the need to empower people with disabilities and empower families, giving them information. There were no community services, no idea of work experience for people. The general trend was, you're born with a child with a disability, it's better to institutionalize that child to protect your family and to allow you as a family to live a better life. So the whole way of thinking, and not only in Indiana, in many places at the time, was very different from what we were trying to do. So it was a very project that had not much impact in terms of actually finding places for the people we worked with, but huge impact on us as growing new professionals in the field.
I think the experience of seeing people in a situation where you realize they have no control, they have no choice, they have no variety, no texture, there's nothing meaningful to the experience for them is life-changing. If you're open to that, you look at that and just say, this has to change, but how? And as a naive student, I thought, well, we have to just do it all differently. And luckily at IU, we got to try a lot of things, and I think we did really begin to understand some of the ways that we needed to listen. But at the same time, we weren't dealing with the funding issues and all that I think complicated. It's a very complicated puzzle.